The academic job market for law professors is increasingly competitive, and it's evolving in complex ways that candidates need to understand. Show how each experience contributed to your scholarly perspective and even your teaching philosophy. How does your perspective allow you to see problems that others might miss? What questions does your background lead you to ask? How does your lived experience make you a better teacher? Law schools can sense authenticity, and they value candidates who bring a fresh perspective and deep commitment to their work.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us for another Justia webinar. My name is Lavinia, and I will be the moderator for today. Now, to kick things off, I wanted to introduce our speaker, Etienne Toussaint. Etienne Toussaint is a private law scholar whose work explores the historical developments of poverty, food insecurity, and environmental injustice within the U.S. political economy. Drawing on critical legal theory, his scholarship examines the intersection of race, culture, and modern social movements in challenging private law's structuring of the economy. He teaches contracts, business associations, law and political economy, and critical legal history at the University of South Carolina's Joseph F. Rice School of Law. For advice on a career in academia, visit www.thetenuretrek.com. The webinar presentation will be approximately 1 hour. If you have any questions that come up during the presentation, please feel free to submit them at the Q&A button at the control panel at the bottom of your screen. Now, without further ado, here's Etienne to discuss becoming a law professor, what aspiring academics need to know.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today on becoming a law professor, what aspiring academics need to know. My name once again is Etienne Toussaint, and I'm an associate professor of law at the University of South Carolina, Joseph F. Rice School of Law, where I teach contracts, business associations, secure transactions, and various seminars exploring the intersections of law, political economy, and legal history. Today, we're going to cover the practical realities of the academic job market, specifically focusing on the legal academic job market. We'll talk about essential qualifications, how to build your profile, the importance of owning your unique story, navigating the application process, and what it's like to actually live this life once you get here. Most importantly, we'll leave plenty of time for your questions at the end, because the best advice is always tailored to your specific situation and goals. Before we dive in, let me share a little bit about my own journey, not because it's the only path into legal academia, but because it illustrates that there are many ways to arrive at this career. I started my career in legal academia with a Bachelor's of Science in Mechanical Engineering from MIT. Then I earned a Master's of Science in Engineering from the Johns Hopkins University, and I worked in engineering and consulting along the way. From grad school, I went to Harvard for law school, and after law school, I practiced as a lawyer at a big law firm in Washington, D.C. in project finance, then moving to a small nonprofit focusing on fair housing issues. And from there, I completed a clinical teaching fellowship at the George Washington University Law School. After finishing my teaching fellowship, I spent 4 years as an assistant professor of law at the University of the District of Columbia School of Law, where I also co-directed a community development law clinic. And now I am an associate professor of law at the University of South Carolina, where I teach, as I mentioned previously, a number of business law courses and law seminars in that area as well. But I want to be honest before we move on and say something important. I didn't come from an academic family. Both of my parents are working class immigrants. My father never went to college. My mother worked as a nurse for her entire career. Growing up, I didn't see a future in academia and didn't even consider it as a career option. But my winding path from engineering through big law, nonprofit work, clinical law teaching, and eventually teaching in a tenure track position taught me that there isn't any one single path to becoming a law professor. What matters is how you weave your own experiences into a cohesive and coherent scholarly voice and teaching philosophy. And that's some of what we're going to talk about today. So let me start with some honest talk about the realities of the academic job market for law schools. The academic job market for law professors is increasingly competitive, and it's evolving in complex ways that candidates need to understand. The field of legal law professors is seeing more and more candidates with advanced degrees beyond just their JD. Often they have PhDs in history, economics, political science, and other disciplines. Many applicants now come to the market with multiple publications already in print. This isn't meant to discourage you, but rather to help you understand what you're entering and how to position yourself strategically. Here's what I want you to understand. This market rewards preparation, authenticity, and persistence. The competition is very real, but so are the opportunities. The key is not to chase what you think committees want to hear, but to develop a genuine scholarly voice that grows from your own experiences and interests. Law schools can sense authenticity, and they value candidates who bring a fresh perspective and deep commitment to their work. The market is also increasingly recognizing that the best teachers and scholars often come from diverse backgrounds and experiences. So your path into legal teaching, whether that's from practice, from other disciplines, or from community-based work, can be a tremendous asset if you frame it thoughtfully. As an aside, I'll note that there are a number of important blogs online that give you some deeper information about the hiring plans for law schools across the country. One such blog is called Prof's Blog, as you can see on the screen. And every year there's a post that goes up in the summertime that allows you to access a downloadable, sortable spreadsheet that shows what law schools are hiring and what they're hiring for. So feel free to take down this information to help you gain more insight into what law schools are hiring in the upcoming academic year. So what are these law schools looking for? The trends aren't uniform across all law schools. Many institutions, particularly those with strong commitments to social justice, critical theory, or public interest work, are actively seeking candidates with interdisciplinary backgrounds. They want scholars who can connect doctrinal knowledge to broader frameworks like political economy, race in the law, or environmental justice. This trend actually favors candidates whose work bridges disciplines or challenges traditional boundaries. On the other hand, some schools, especially those facing financial pressures or political pressures or shifting student demands, are returning to more traditional hiring preferences. They prioritize curricular needs, large enrollment courses like contracts, torts, or civil procedure, and often they're seeking candidates whose profiles align closely with those teaching requirements. The ability to teach bar courses remains a significant factor in many hiring decisions. You'll encounter several types of positions in your search: tenure track appointments, clinical law teaching positions, legal writing roles, and increasingly visiting assistant professor positions and postdoctoral fellowships that are geared to help you enter the academy. Each of these positions serve different goals, and they offer different career paths and different expectations. The timeline for this market is particularly challenging. Most schools hire in the fall for positions that begin the following August, which means that this can be almost a year-long process. So you have to plan well in advance, and sometimes you're making career decisions with significant lead time. There is a writing expectation that comes with this career, which means having at least one strong publication is increasingly important in your job application. Hiring committees want evidence that you can take a scholarly project from idea to print, especially in law, where publishing timelines are often very long and competitive. A published article shows more than promise. It demonstrates your ability to follow through, and it signals that you're ready to contribute to faculty workshops and scholarly conversations. If you don't have a published article, but you have a strong draft under submission or forthcoming, coupled with a compelling research agenda and a clear voice, that can still be very competitive. The best candidates are able to demonstrate both. They have a solid publication record of at least one strong publication, and they have a vision for where their scholarship is heading with a scholarly agenda. Ultimately, committees want to see evidence of scholarly potential alongside demonstrated ability to complete projects and contribute meaningfully to academic conversations. As you can see here, one of the key websites that is important in legal academia is SSRN, where you can search for existing legal articles or upload your own. Let's talk about what you actually need to be competitive and the various routes that people take into legal academia. So, of course, you need a JD from an accredited law school. While elite law schools still provide advantages in terms of networks and perceived prestige, they're not the only path. And when I say elite law schools, I'm talking about the schools that are highly ranked in the rankings, such as the US News reports. That would be schools like Harvard, Yale, Stanford, etc. But these are not the only ways to get into legal teaching jobs. And if you search law schools across the country, you'll often find many, many law professors with degrees from schools that are not in the top 5 or top 10. What actually matters more is what you do during and after law school. Your grades, your participation in activities like the law review, judicial clerkships, and of course, your scholarship. As I mentioned earlier, increasingly candidates also have advanced degrees. PhDs, for example, in related fields can provide methodological training and signal that you are a serious scholar who can produce scholarship that contributes to the law school community. But let me be clear, a PhD is not required. Some of the most innovative legal scholars only have JDs. So what matters is demonstrating intellectual depth and the ability to contribute meaningfully to legal discourse. Also important is practice experience. There's a myth that big law experience, which means working at a big law firm, is the gold standard for academic hiring. And in fact, there was a point at which many law professors came out of big law firms. While law firm experience is treated as an important credential because it signals strong writing skills, it signals a certain kind of rigor and institutional familiarity, it's no longer the gold standard or the only way to become a law professor. Many hiring committees are recognizing the depth and richness of other kinds of lawyering practice, especially those that demonstrate direct engagement with communities or with public institutions or even with social movements. For example, my own work in nonprofit fair housing advocacy and my work as a clinical law fellow gave me unique insights and experience into how law operates and impacts people's everyday lives. And that became a central part of my package to demonstrate my scholarly identity and to make me attractive to law teaching opportunities. The key for candidates with clinical, public interest, or policy backgrounds is translating that experience into a scholarly frame. If you can show how your practice raises pressing legal questions, whether it's about power, structure, inequality, or governance, you can position yourself as an asset to the law school community. Let's talk about VAPs and fellowships. Both VAPs, which means visiting assistant professorships, and fellowships can be excellent launching pads, but they serve different functions. VAPs often emphasize teaching experience, which is critical if you're targeting schools that value classroom performance, or if you need to show that you can teach core doctrinal classes. Fellowships, especially those focused on research, provide time and mentorship to sharpen your scholarly identity and to help you publish those first few law review articles. My advice is to assess what you need most. If you've already taught before and you've had the opportunity to perhaps teach a class as an adjunct or teach during graduate school, then maybe you need to focus on getting a fellowship that gives you time to write and to produce scholarship. If you're still learning how to translate your ideas into teaching and you need to show that you can teach a law class, then a visiting assistant professorship provides you with the time and mentorship to demonstrate that skill set. Always consider the opportunity for mentorship, consider the opportunity to publish, and consider the intellectual culture of the program itself, not just the brand name. On the right here, you'll see a link to a website that provides a lot more information to help you review the VAPs and fellowships that are available. And that is through the American Association of Law Schools. Now let's get practical and talk about how you actually build a competitive profile for academic hiring. Your research agenda should grow organically from your genuine intellectual curiosities and experiences, not from what you think is trending in legal scholarship. My own focus on law, political economy, and legal history emerges from my personal interests and my practice experiences and deeper questions that I've developed over time about how law structures opportunity and inequality. For example, working in engineering and nonprofit settings exposed me to structural questions that planted seeds for thinking in terms of political economy. As I pursued scholarship, I began to see these not just as policy issues, but as part of longer legal and historical struggles. So my research agenda didn't come fully formed. It grew over time through the intersection of my practice experiences and the legal theory that I learned along the way. In addition, it was infused by some of the day-to-day client realities that I was exposed to as a clinical law professor and deeper legal theories that I learned as I persisted in my scholarly endeavors. Teaching experience is also crucial to your application, but it doesn't have to come through traditional routes. Clinical work, adjunct teaching, continuing legal education, bar exam prep, and even training programs in your practice can all demonstrate teaching ability. The key is to reflect on how these experiences articulate what you've learned about pedagogy, what you've learned about student learning, and what you've learned about curriculum design. If you're currently practicing as an attorney, look for opportunities to teach and train others. You can volunteer to speak at CLEs. You can mentor junior associates. You can reach out to law schools and ask about guest lecturing opportunities or adjunct teaching. These experiences help you discover whether you enjoy teaching and also provides concrete examples to discuss in your interviews. Also, as I mentioned earlier, there are visiting assistant professor programs and academic fellowship programs that can give you the time and space to teach and actually get that experience that you can put on your CV. And the AALS website provides some of this information that you can learn about in more detail. Third, I want to talk about networking. Coming from practice, you may not have a built-in academic network, but you can build one through authentic engagement. The most valuable strategy is showing up genuinely and with curiosity, reading other people's work, engaging seriously with it, and reaching out with real questions or thoughtful praise. Academic conferences are useful not just for presenting your own work, but for attending panels that align with your interests and following up with panelists afterwards. Don't just collect business cards, have real conversations with people about ideas that interest you. Lean on mentors and former professors who can open doors and make introductions. Share your work in progress with people you admire, ask good questions, and remember that relationship building is a long game. So nurture it with care and humility, and you'll reap rewards in the long term. This brings me to something that I feel very passionate about, and that is the importance of owning your unique path and perspective as a strength, not a weakness for you to overcome. Your scholarly voice should reflect who you are and what you bring to legal academia. This isn't about finding a niche market gap to fill, but about identifying the questions and perspectives that only you can contribute to based on your unique combination of experiences, training, and insights. For me, the intersection of my engineering background, my practice experience, and my unique interests in law and race, in legal history, in the Reconstruction era, in Black studies, created a distinctive lens for examining how law shapes economic relations and social structures in our modern world. Your combination will be different, but equally valuable if you develop it thoughtfully. If your path to legal academia has been winding through other careers, different disciplines, various types of practice, don't apologize for it. Don't treat it as something to explain away. Instead, show how each experience contributed to your scholarly perspective and even your teaching philosophy. The key is moving from apology to narrative. There's no such thing as winding too much if you can own it with clarity and conviction. In fact, a non-linear path often reflects real-world insights, resilience, and intellectual depth. The goal is to reframe that narrative not as something to overcome, but as the foundation of your unique scholarly perspective. My engineering background taught me how to think systematically about problems and solutions. My big law experience showed me how commercial law actually operates at scale. My nonprofit work revealed how legal structures can perpetuate or challenge inequality. And my clinical law teaching demonstrated how legal education can serve community needs. None of these domains were detours. They were all essential to helping me develop my unique scholarly voice. So rather than minimizing or over-explaining your diverse background, highlight the through lines. What connects your journey across disciplines? What questions have followed you from one domain to another? If you can identify that coherence, not in your resume per se, but in your intellectual curiosity, you can invite others to see your path as expansive and as part of one journey rather than scattered. Legal academia benefits tremendously from diverse experiences and perspectives. And your background, whether it's being a first-generation college student, whether it's military service or community organizing, whether it's a journey through the arts or science or any other path, brings insights that a purely traditional academic background cannot provide. I'll be honest, As a Black male from a working class background, academia can sometimes feel lonely. You may find yourself as the only person in faculty meetings or conferences that shares your unique perspective or your background. But that's exactly why your voice matters. Interdisciplinary work shows intellectual range and often reflects a willingness to ask foundational questions, questions that don't always fit into one neatly shaped box. And that's a strength. So you should articulate how your diverse background equips you to see legal problems differently, or primes you to challenge assumptions that are baked into traditional legal doctrine. The key in your application is learning how to articulate how your experiences inform your scholarship and your teaching, not just mentioning them as biographical details. How does your perspective allow you to see problems that others might miss? What questions does your background lead you to ask? How does your lived experience make you a better teacher and a better scholar that doesn't just benefit students, but also your potential colleagues? Hiring committees can sense when candidates are performing a version of what they think academia wants versus speaking from genuine conviction. Your authentic voice, shaped by your real experiences and interests, is far more compelling than a perfectly polished performance of academic convention. So much of academic hiring is about fit, but fit doesn't mean conformity. It means knowing who you are, what you bring, and how your journey uniquely positions you to contribute to legal scholarship. When candidates embrace their path, they often speak with more authority, more imagination, and more authenticity. And that's magnetic. This doesn't mean being unprofessional. It doesn't mean being unprepared. It means grounding your scholarship and your teaching philosophy in who you actually are and what you actually care about, rather than what you think sounds impressive. Let's talk about the practical mechanics of applying for academic positions and how to present yourself authentically in a competitive market. Now, I'll just note the Association of American Law Schools, or AALS, hosts every year a faculty recruitment conference. It's often called, because they couldn't think of a better name, the meat market. But it is the central hub for academic hiring nonetheless. The process has evolved significantly, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic, but it is still the place that most applicants go to gain access to law teaching jobs. And the timeline typically works like this. The applications are due in late summer, early fall. So right around this time is when law schools are beginning to field these applications. The initial interviews happen by the schools beginning around the August, September timeframe. And since the COVID-19 pandemic, many of these initial screening interviews are happening virtually. Then, after having a virtual interview, law schools begin what is called a callback interview process, where they screen candidates and invite candidates for a second round interview that takes place in person at the law school. And that typically takes place between September all the way often through January, February, sometimes into the March timeframe. What that means for you is that now is the time for you to begin pulling together your application materials and submitting them to be invited for that initial virtual screening. And then hopefully you'll be invited for a second round on-campus interview in the coming months, where you can present your application and conduct what is called a job talk, which I'll talk about in a moment. So first, let's begin with how you tell your story. Your cover letter should tell a coherent story about your path to academia and your scholarly agenda. Don't just list your credentials, connect them to your intellectual development and your future research plans. Show how your experiences have shaped your perspective and prepared you for an academic career. Your CV or your academic resume should be comprehensive but strategic. It should include all of your relevant experiences, but it should be organized in a way that highlights your academic preparation. Don't hide your practice experience. Frame it as valuable preparation for scholarship and for teaching. Your research agenda should be ambitious but achievable. It should be specific enough to show that you've thought deeply about methodology and contribution, but it also should be flexible enough to show that you're open to evolving and exploring new pathways in your legal research. Avoid jargon that you're trying to use just to impress, and make sure that someone outside of your specific area can understand why your work matters and the contribution that you're trying to make. On the AALS website, you'll find more information about the Faculty Appointments Register, which is an online database where you would submit your application materials, and that allows law schools to contact you directly and invite you for law teaching job opportunities. Once you're invited to an initial screening interview and you've successfully done what is often a virtual 30-minute interview, you'll then be invited to an on-campus interview that is a day long, sometimes a day and a half, and it includes something called a job talk. So your job talk is often the most important part of the process. It showcases your best thinking. It demonstrates your ability to engage in a scholarly conversation with other faculty members, and it provides a sense of your teaching style and your intellectual presence. What happens during a job talk is you're allowed an opportunity to present a piece of legal scholarship that you've submitted to the faculty in advance to read. As a result, you should choose a piece of legal scholarship that represents your scholarly voice and highlights your agenda, not necessarily your most recent or your most complex project. You certainly want to practice extensively, but you don't want to over-rehearse to the point where you sound robotic. Remember, this is an opportunity for faculty to see how you teach and how you respond in real time in a teaching environment. So you want to be prepared for challenging questions and see them as an opportunity to demonstrate your intellectual flexibility and your intellectual depth. Remember, this is also a mutual evaluation. So you should be thinking about what these potential future colleagues, how they ask questions and how they engage with you as a scholar and teacher. The job talk is part of a larger campus visit. And this is an opportunity for you to also assess the school where you might potentially work and see if you would be a good fit to join the faculty. So be genuinely curious about the institution, about the students, about the mission and culture. Generally, what happens during this campus visit is you will have a series of small group interviews with faculty, with administration, and with students, alongside your job talk, which is usually an hour-long process where you present your scholarship for 20 to 30 minutes, and then you have 30 minutes of a question and answer period. Don't try to be what you think the school wants. Show who you are in an authentic way and show what you would contribute to the specific community. Schools can tell when candidates are just saying what they think the committee members want to hear, as opposed to speaking from a genuine and authentic place of interest and conviction. This market involves significant rejection, even for successful candidates. A no from one law school doesn't mean that you're not bound to be a scholar or a teacher. It simply reflects the institutional needs, it reflects the timing and the fit factors that often are outside of your control. If you're fortunate to have multiple offers, then consider factors beyond prestige. Consider scholarly support, teaching load, institutional mission, geographic location, family considerations, and even long-term career goals. The best position is one that aligns with your values and supports your ability to thrive as both a scholar and an individual person who wants to teach and engage in a community in a meaningful way. Finally, let's talk about what it actually means to work as a law professor and thrive once you get into the position, because the goal isn't just to get hired, it's about building a sustainable and fulfilling long-term career. The tenure process itself can feel overwhelming, but it's essentially about demonstrating growth and contribution across three domains: scholarship, teaching, and service within the academic environment. So you want to focus on building a coherent body of work rather than just chasing publication quantity. You want to develop relationships with mentors, both within and outside your institution, that can provide guidance and support to help you grow as a teacher and a scholar. And you want to set realistic timelines for your projects and build in flexibility for the unexpected demands of academic life. Remember that tenure evaluation looks at both the trajectory of your work and the long-term potential of your career as a scholar, as much as it looks at your current achievements. Academic life offers tremendous flexibility, but it also means that work can expand to fit all the available time that you allow it to. So you have to set boundaries around what you write, how you teach, and what kind of service activities you engage in. The freedom of the academic schedule can be both a blessing and a curse. You have a lot of autonomy over your time, but you have to create your own structure and hold yourself accountable. Create rhythms that allow for balance between work time and family time and personal time. And it's easy to get caught up in the metrics of academic success: publication counts, citation numbers, conference invitations, and lose sight of why you wanted to do this work in the first place. And that is why I think it's important to reconnect with your why and focus on what your ultimate purpose is in becoming a law professor. Remember that your work has real-world implications. Whether you're writing about doctrine, whether you're writing about legal theory, whether you're writing about law reform, your scholarship contributes to how the law develops and how lawyers think about their practice. And that's both a privilege and an immense responsibility. Academic life can be isolating if you allow it to. And this is why it's important to not just focus on solitary scholarship, but to be engaged in the community and participate in institutions that allow you to give back in a meaningful way. And let me share something personal that I've done that tries to do this. Last year, almost a year ago, I started a Substack newsletter called The Tenure Track, where I share tips about navigating academia from my own personal experience. If you're interested in more detailed guidance on some of the topics I've mentioned here, feel free to check it out. It's located at www.thetenuretrack.com. And there are a wide range of other organizations that provide similar resources that I would urge you to take advantage of. One such resource that I've mentioned before is the American Association of Law Schools, or www.AALS.org. www.aals.org. And of course, Justia, the host of this webinar, also offers a lot of great resources that you can take advantage of. Now let's shift gears into the Q&A portion of the webinar. And before we turn to questions, I want to leave you with this. Legal academia needs the perspectives, experiences, and insights that each of you brings. The path isn't easy, and the market is very competitive, but there's a lot of room for authenticity and innovation. Don't try to fit someone else's model of what a law professor should be. Instead, figure out what unique contribution you can make to legal education and legal scholarship, and pursue that with rigor, with authenticity, and with persistence. Your diverse background, your practice experience, and your scholarly interests aren't obstacles for you to overcome. They're assets that can make legal academia richer and more relevant to the issues of our time. The question isn't whether you're qualified enough, but whether you're committed to the hard and rewarding work of developing those qualifications and finding your unique scholarly voice. Whether you're a first-generation college student, whether you come from a working class background, whether you're coming from practice or bringing perspectives that haven't been traditionally centered in legal academia, remember that these experiences are precisely what the field needs. Your unique combination, your training, your insights can contribute something that no one else can. You belong here. So now let's spend some of our remaining time with your questions and your concerns. And I'd love to delve into the details and ask what aspects of this process you'd like to explore further. Here's some examples of some things that we could talk about: application strategies, career transitions, developing scholarship, or navigating the market. But ultimately, I'd love to just talk about whatever would be most helpful to you. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and we can open it up to questions.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Etienne, for your wonderful presentation and all of your insights. I'm sure it's very, very helpful for everyone who's interested in the academic track. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and move on into the questions. Like he said, as a friendly reminder, if you do have any questions, you can submit them at the Q&A button at the control panel at the bottom of your screen. So let's go ahead and get started. The first question that we have is, if one has published academically, but a really long time ago, like 20 years, is that publication still of use?
It's valuable to show that you have a scholarly interest, and it's valuable to show your intellectual curiosity, but I don't believe that it would be a strong option for you to use as your primary piece of scholarship to showcase during your application and interview process. During your interview and in your application, you'll be asked to submit a piece of legal scholarship. And law schools are expecting you to submit something that's much more recent than that, something you published in the past couple of years, something that reflects upon more recent legal issues and shows your intellectual curiosity about current challenges in the legal field. So I would recommend that you keep it on your resume. You can include it in your application and, frame it as part of your story. You've always been intellectually curious. You had an early interest in scholarship, but you decided to take a different route to explore the world, to explore some other fields. And now you're coming back full circle and revisiting that early interest, and use it as a way to launch into some more recent scholarship that you can talk about in interviews.
Great. Now, there was an attendee who asked that they wanted to become an adjunct professor after 30 plus years as a lawyer. What are the special considerations you would need for that?
Yeah, to become an adjunct professor, Generally speaking, you just apply directly to the opportunities that are advertised by the law school itself. The process for getting job opportunities as an adjunct professor is different than the process to get a job opportunity as a tenure track professor or a legal writing and legal research professor. Um, in those instances, law schools are directly advertising the adjunct positions, and sometimes that's done on LinkedIn and other job sites, sometimes on the law school's website itself. What I would recommend is to research the law schools in your geographic area, reach out to them directly. Sometimes you can email the dean directly, email the associate dean of academic affairs, and pitch yourself, share your resume, share your interest in teaching, and say a little bit about your practice experience. Sometimes law schools are actually looking for lawyers to propose classes, not necessarily teach a class that's been advertised. And I know individuals that have gained opportunities in that way. So even if a class is not currently being taught at a law school, or it is not advertised as a class where they're looking for teachers, you can pitch a class, send an email, send a cover letter with a resume and say, I've been working for 30 years in this particular field. I'd love to teach this class. I noticed that it's not offered at your school, and I think I can add tremendous value by providing that offering as an upper level class for your students. Are you interested? And I think a lot of law schools would be really excited to talk more about that with you.
All right, great. Now we do have one that may be pretty similar, so feel free to let us know if it is. But we do have an attendee who is retiring and does have graduate school experience, and they are interested in visiting or guest professorship. Do you have any additional comments aside from, what you mentioned about your previous comments regarding just this particular track?
Yeah, so generally speaking, being invited to be a guest lecturer or participating with a professor in a class will come from networking or reaching out. And so I would recommend reaching out directly to professors at law schools that are teaching courses in your area of expertise, or who you've met at conferences or events, and asking, say, I'm interested in potentially guest lecturing in your course. I have expertise in this area from my practice, and I'd love to contribute if there's any way I can help. And I think a lot of faculty would be really receptive to that and find ways to incorporate you into the class. And that can be an entry point into a law school. You can develop relationships, and it could lead to adjunct teaching opportunities. It could even lead to you being invited to apply for a full-time role.
All right. Now, the next one is kind of a two for one. I'll be asking two questions that are pretty related. So, the first one is what sort of legal writing qualifies as a scholarship? Is it solely publication in legal journals, or could it also be a long form legal news and article count? And then the second one is that there was someone who had recently sold a home for nearly $500,000 despite not being a realtor, and they're currently writing a book to share their experiences with others. Would that be considered, scholarly piece of writing?
So this is a great question. Um, and this has evolved over time. I will say that traditionally, legal scholarship was viewed as a scholarly article in a legal journal, such as a law review or a legal periodical. And when I mean legal scholarship, traditionally that would mean an article or essay that is analyzing legal doctrine or policy. And what that means might be discussing recent cases, case law, discussing recent judicial opinions, or discussing recent legislation and critiquing it, analyzing it, talking about strengths, weaknesses, maybe looking at it through a comparative perspective, or bringing in legal theory to talk about the shortcomings, the benefits, the impacts, etc. Right? Really doing that analysis of the law or the policy. That is still very much a part of what lawyers and law professors view as scholarship. And that type of scholarship is traditionally published in law review journals or legal periodicals. So generally speaking, when faculty are thinking about what constitutes legal scholarship, they're looking at writing that talks about legal cases, judicial opinions, that talks specifically about the law or legislation or policy, which can be at the local level, at the state level, or at the federal level, or at the international level, and really analyzing what the law says, what it means. You might be critiquing the judicial opinion. You might be critiquing the perspective of a particular court. You might be comparing competing perspectives from different jurisdictions and talking about which one got it right, which one got it wrong. You might be exploring history. And so, one thing to note that over time, legal scholarship has incorporated methodologies from other fields. So often in legal scholarship today, you'll see history incorporated, sociology, economics, statistics, empirical analysis, and those other methodologies are brought in to deepen the analysis. So I'm not solely looking at the law as it stands today, but I might be comparing it to the historical development of the legal doctrine. I might be comparing it to the philosophical conversations that have occurred about that topic. I might be looking at how the law has impacted different groups in a community or in a state and employing sociological research. Um, I might be critiquing the very theory that underlies the formation of the law or that guides the constitutional analysis of the court. And therefore, I might be bringing in the insights from philosophers, from other academics in other fields. So there are a lot of ways that law as an academic discipline has become very interdisciplinary, which is why often law professors are now bringing in degrees from other fields, PhDs in history or economics or sociology or et cetera, et cetera. And so it's a long answer, but that said, when you're applying for a law teaching position, the best way to have a strong application is to have a piece of legal scholarship both on your CV and as part of your application that incorporates more of that traditional scholarly analysis, which means the scholarship is talking about the law, it's talking about judicial opinions, it's talking about legislation, and it's analyzing it, maybe solely just analyzing law or bringing in some of those other methodologies like economics or history or theory, philosophy, etc. Once you are a law professor, law professors incorporate a wide variety of scholarships. So sometimes law professors are writing scholarship that is more policy oriented and that might present itself more as a policy brief or piece of advocacy. Law professors are writing books that are written for a more general audience. Law professors are writing legal periodicals that go into newspapers or bar periodicals. Law professors are writing blogs or op-eds that again are written for a more general audience and not as technical. They might be writing pieces for their local bar. And all of those can contribute to a scholarly portfolio that's part of your tenure package. And different schools have different conventions on how they incorporate those different aspects of your overall scholarly agenda. But when it comes to applying for a position, while that panoply of different kinds of work can showcase your writing skills and showcase your interest, it is still important to have, I would say, at least one piece of scholarship that is more traditional, something that you would find in a law journal or some kind of academic publication that shows your ability to do legal research and analysis.
Thank you so much. It was very in-depth and very, very helpful. We do have our next question that's a little bit in relation to law review journals. So, are there law review journals that have shorter acceptance or publication cycles, maybe because they're online? And are there law review journals that are easier to publish in, for example, like niche journals, but are still well regarded by academia?
So this is a great question. And one of the things I'll say up front, and this is somewhat of a criticism of legal academia, and it's a characteristic of the legal profession more generally. Legal academia can be very prestige driven and very hierarchical. All of you are very familiar with the US News and World Report, right? Rankings are still viewed as important. People still care about what school is ranked first and what school is ranked 10. And even law students think about rankings when they're picking schools. So the same thing happens on the hiring side, which means that if a candidate submits an application with articles that are published in very highly ranked journals, that is going to be viewed as more prestigious than a candidate that submits an article in a journal that is lower ranked. And that's just something that's true because of the hierarchy, the elitism, right? So to give a better word that signifies the negative aspect of it, the elitism of the industry. It doesn't mean that there are law schools that don't value scholarship from a wide range of journals, but it's something to keep in mind that if you're trying to be a law professor at Harvard Law School, they're going to value those articles that are published in higher ranked journals than lower ranked journals. And so you just have to be cognizant of the school that you're applying to. That said, let me talk about what it takes to publish and the different options. So publishing in a law review is very different than publishing in other academic disciplines. The way in other academic disciplines, you submit your article to one publication outlet, one journal, and you then have to wait for a period of time to see if that publication wants to work with you, right? And there may be a little bit of back and forth. They have to get other academics to review your work as a peer review process. They may ask you to revise your article if you want to work with them. And then finally, they accept your article for publication. And that can be a months-long process. And sometimes after the end of months, they might say, no, we're not going to work with you. Law reviews are very different. The law reviews have two main cycles. One is in August and one is in January, where the law reviews invite submissions. You can submit to all of the law reviews at the same time. Now, there is a fee associated with submitting your articles to law reviews, which is, again, a criticism of academia more generally. As an aside, there is a way to bypass the fee in some ways. The reason why there's a fee is because most law reviews are accepting submissions through through two different platforms. One is called Scholastica, and it's a website where you can upload your scholarship and then submit it directly to the law review. And there's another platform that many law schools use. However, some law schools, or law journals rather, allow you to email your articles directly to them. And that's something that some scholars aren't aware of, that you could actually contact the law review directly and email them your journal. There's no guarantee that they'll take it, but I venture to say if you email a law review directly and say, I'm a working lawyer, I don't have the resources to pay for this Scholastica system, but I have a law article and I'd love to be considered, many law reviews will consider it. That is something to keep in mind. And some law journals actually allow you to submit formally without having to pay, and they have it on their website, a way that you can just submit directly to them. So you submit to all of the law reviews at once, and through the platform, they either accept or reject, and they give you a period of time to accept their offer. They may say you have a week to decide whether you want to publish with us, or you have 12 hours. All right. And the higher ranked journals will give you a much shorter window. And the reason why they're giving you an opportunity to accept or deny is that once a publication has given you an offer, you actually have the opportunity to communicate that to the other journals and see if they'd like to give you an offer. So there's a little bit of competition that emerges in the law review publication process. Once a journal has given me an offer, through the platform, I can send a message to all of the other journals that I've submitted my work to and say, you know, X law review has given me an offer. Would you like to give me an offer? And that sometimes primes the law review to say, oh, we want that article now. Let's give them an offer. And there's a little bit of a bidding war that emerges. So that happens in August and January. And that's for the traditional law reviews and for some of the specialty law reviews. The traditional law reviews they invite scholarship across a wide range of topics, and they produce publications that generally are covering a wide range of topics, although sometimes they have specialty issues that focus on a particular topic. And sometimes that's associated with a symposium that the law review has hosted on that topic. But also the question noted that there are specialty journals. There may be, for example, a journal on environmental law, and they accept submissions on articles about a particular environmental law topic. And whether it's easier or harder to be published in the journal, there are a lot of different factors that we don't have time to get into. Sometimes it's the prestige of the school itself, right? So the Harvard Environmental Law Review, even though it's a specialty journal, it's still quite difficult to be accepted for publication there versus sometimes a law review at another school. So it all kind of depends. And those specialty journals often are opening for submissions in the August and January timeline. That said, the final thing I'll say, two final things I'll say, many law schools in the recent 5 to 10 years have created online law journals or law reviews, and these invite shorter legal publications. So the typical length for a law review article is between 20 to 25,000 words. The online journals invite publications between the 10 to 15,000 word range. And that sometimes can be an entry point. Oftentimes they invite submissions throughout the entire year, and it's a direct email to the law review. And even though it's a shorter publication, that can give you something on your CV that you can begin talking about. So sometimes your application could be a shorter 10,000 word piece in an online law review and a longer 20,000 word draft. That's your job talk paper that you talk about.
Great. Thank you so much for that. So, someone did ask, Professor, given your journey to academia, do you feel you could have gone into academia prior to or instead of going into law practice, or was the practice in the law firm essential to becoming a law professor?
Okay, so really great question. And are there any other questions that I could maybe combine into this final answer?
Oh, let me see. There are a couple that are more about kind of the application and interview process. So I could combine that into there a little bit. It's relatively related, but if you want, I can definitely ask that one.
Okay, well, let's ask that one after for a final one. But
Okay.
th- um could I have become a law professor without going into practice? What I assume that question is asking is, after I graduated from law school and I went to Harvard Law School, could I have applied directly to teach at a law school and been competitive as an applicant? So I certainly could have applied. If I'm going to be very honest, I would say that you would not be very competitive applying to teach as a law professor directly out of law school, even if you went to Harvard or Yale. And that is simply because it's very, very competitive to become a law professor. I mean, there once was a day, maybe 50, 60 years ago, where you could do that. I would say it's very, very difficult to do that now. You would have to already have publications. You'd have to already be able to demonstrate teaching experience and high level of competence. The people who do that, I would say, are getting a legal degree as a second degree, and they're already have a PhD, or they currently are a graduate student in a doctoral program. And sometimes that happens. Someone is in a doctoral program and they decide, I want to get a JD, and then they apply directly to a teaching position. The reason why they're going to be more successful is because as a part of their doctoral program, they're working on scholarship and they're serving as a graduate teaching assistant, so they can show that they know how to teach, they know how to operate in an academic environment. If you're only going to law school, it's going to be very difficult. I would say, to be competitive, going on the job market, in addition to going to law school, you either need to work as a lawyer and develop that expertise, which would make you very competitive for clinical teaching positions, or to be able to enter into a doctrinal position and say that you have a certain level of expertise. And what I mean when I say clinical versus doctrinal, these are kind of buzzwords. A clinical law teacher teaches a law school clinic. Often nowadays, there are teachers that are teaching both. Traditionally, it was separated between the two. And a law school clinic is where a law professor is supervising students who are providing pro bono legal services to indigent clients or lower income clients in the community. And it's often required in law schools for students to have that clinic experience. Doctrinal teaching means you're teaching in a more traditional large law school class where you're just talking about the law and teaching the legal doctrine through the case law method, the Socratic method. And those are your traditional classes like contracts, torts, etc. Most law professors who are teaching in the doctrinal context are teaching contracts, criminal law. They either have a lot of practice experience at a law firm or in the government position, or they have a clerkship and they spent some time building that legal analysis skill. So getting a clerkship is really great. Working on law review during law school is really excellent. And otherwise, having some scholarship that you can talk about, even if you're a practicing lawyer, you can mention that you've worked on some scholarship as well on your own time, can make you a competitive applicant.
All right. And then for that last question that you mentioned you'd answer, if you know, can you speak to how the application and interview process, especially the job talk portion, differs for those applying for legal research and writing positions?
Sure. So with any position that you're applying for, the goal of the hiring committee is to determine whether you're a good fit for that particular position. So as I mentioned, for most law teaching positions, there's a two-step process. The first step is submitting a cover letter, a CV or / resume, and a sometimes also a writing sample, which is your scholarship that you would talk about. And the first step is a screening interview stage where you will be invited for a screening interview, or you might call it a first round interview. And it's going to be a shorter interview, 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes. And the goal of that interview is really just to get to know who you are as a scholar, as a teacher, and as a potential colleague. They're going to ask questions about your scholarly interests. They're going to ask questions tailored to the kind of class that you want to teach. If you want to be a legal research and writing teacher, they're going to ask about how you might teach a legal research and writing class. If you want to be a clinical law professor, they're going to ask, how would you direct a clinic? How would you teach those students? What kinds of approaches would you take? If you're going to teach in the big class towards contracts, they're going to ask, how would you teach those kinds of students? And then to determine what type of colleague you'd be, they'll ask more general interview questions. How do you work with others? How do you overcome problems in the workplace? When's the last time you encountered a problem? How did you solve it? Those traditional interview questions. If you're invited to a second round interview, they're going to bring you to campus and you're going to meet with potential colleagues that can assess in a more intimate way how you might engage in that particular role. So if you're going to work as a legal research and writing professor, you'll meet with the legal research and writing faculty. They'll ask you even more detailed questions. How are you going to teach these classes? You'll meet with students who might kind of gauge, what is it? What are you like? And then you often be asked, you will be asked to do a presentation of some kind. The most traditional presentation is the job talk, as I mentioned, which you're presenting your scholarship. So you will speak in front of a room of 30 people, perhaps, from faculty to administration, and sometimes even students, about your scholarship, about a piece of scholarship that you've written. And the goal of that presentation is not just to show that you're smart and you can talk about what you've written. The goal of the presentation is to show that you're a good teacher, right? So it's not just about what you say, it's about how you say it. Can you stand up in front of a room of 30 people and teach them about a topic that's complex, that has a lot of nuances, that you've written about in your scholarship? They may be foreign to the topic, right? How do you introduce this complexity? How do you guide them through your analysis? Can you keep it interesting? Can you keep it engaging? And then can you field questions from people that span the gamut? Some questions might be spot on and you know how to answer it. Some questions might literally be from left field and you're thinking in your mind, I don't understand what they've asked, right? How do you respond to a question where you don't know what the question means? And that's a very important skill for a law professor, because I will tell you, every semester I get a question from a student where in real time I'm asking myself, I have no idea what they just asked me. How do I respond to keep the classroom conversation going, to be very responsive to what the student is asking, to not delay time, but also to empower and encourage that student? Because how I respond might shut them down, or it might inspire them to keep going, even if the question is totally off base. And that's a certain skill set that you develop over time, but faculty are looking for that too, even at the application stage. Sometimes if you're applying for a clinical teaching position or a legal research and writing position, you'll be asked to present something that's related to the position. So you might be asked to pitch your clinic, right? What would the clinic be about? What would you do? Or if it's a legal research and writing position, they might ask you to do a mock class or present like a demo of a module that you would teach. I've seen a number of different ways that they've tried to gauge what would this person be like in front of the classroom. And of course, you'll meet with administration, you'll meet with faculty again during this campus interview for an entire day, very exhausting, like back to back to back meetings from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Then you'll go out to dinner where you have to talk to people more. It's a very exhausting full day of interviews, but it's an opportunity for them to gauge who you are and for you to gauge who they are and to see whether it's a good fit. And so that's generally how it works. And after that second round, you'd be invited for a job opportunity from there.
Fantastic. All right. I did want to thank you and everyone for joining our webinar today. Most importantly, thank you so much, Etienne, for your wonderful insights. It was so in-depth, and I'm sure it was very, very helpful for those going on into that academic path. For anyone who might be interested in a career pivot, whether it is to academia or beyond, as mentioned at the start of today's presentation, Justia has a growing suite of services to help you succeed in your job search. Justia Legal Jobs is a comprehensive legal job board with thousands of opportunities across the US, as well as remote roles. You can get started searching today at justia.jobs. While you're searching for jobs, you can also sign up for our free Legal Jobs newsletter, which features our in-house counsel roles at leading companies, public interest jobs, and more. And lawyers looking for new legal talent, as a Justia Connect member, you can post jobs on Justia Legal Jobs and reach Justia's legal audience for free. And we hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you once again for joining us.
Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy it, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos on law practice and legal marketing. See you in our next video.